say thank you for coming, and thank you to Fernando for keeping your doctoral research alive.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to have somebody to listen to your ideas and the things you are working on. Thank you very much. My name is Fernando Galindo. I am from Bolivia, part of the Universidad Mayor de San Simón, which is the second largest university in my country, about 80,000 students, more or less. At the present, I am as a fellow, postdoctoral fellow here at the Department of Education, University of Bath, working on a research project that deals with reflexivity in research, social science research. Originally, I am a sociologist, I am a rural sociologist, but I have studied other things like philosophy, a little bit of law, and agronomy, and different things. And basically, my work in Bolivia is with indigenous and peasant communities, and I teach also at the university some classes in theory and methodology, research methodology at the undergrad and graduate level. That's it. I'm very happy to be here. Okay, I have entitled this presentation, Keeping Your Doctoral Research Alive, the Potential Benefits of Reflexivity. I thank you very much to Jill and to Seth, Jacqueline, for suggesting this interesting title. And if you are interested, there is a paper, and probably I can send you, if you are interested, the presentation. And there is a link to the paper, and you can just click in there and go to the paper, which is in the web. It's a draft, but I think it basically outlines the basic ideas. I have the following purposes in this presentation. One is to present a particular research tool, a reflective research diary. Then to provide a few tips about how to keep a reflective research diary. Then to discuss the benefits of reflexivity. And if we have time, just share a little bit about my own research. And so those are my purposes for this session. This presentation is organized in 6 parts. First, I'm going to very briefly touch upon the notion of reflexivity. Then we are going to exchange some ideas about why do we write a doctoral thesis. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's a reflective research diary. Then ways of keeping a research diary, and then the benefits of reflexivity, and then just share a little bit of my research. First, to begin with the notion of reflexivity. Probably you, in your classes or in your seminars, you have encountered this notion very often. Yeah? And it basically, in the social sciences, has 2 senses. But first, what do I understand for reflexivity? It's like, it's this capacity, this ability of an entity. It could be a human being, it could be an institution, it could be an object, it could be even an animal, I would say, yeah, that has this ability to turn its gaze, yeah, its attention into itself. Yeah? It's like in a mirror. You look into a mirror and then you have an image, you know. And very simply defined, that would be, in my understanding, reflexivity. There are a number of different definitions, but the purpose of this presentation is not to discuss that notion, just to have it as a reference. In the social sciences, there are, I think, two different ways how reflexivity has been dealt. One is as a feature, as a characteristics of modern societies. Yeah? This capacity that they have to look into itself. You know? Before, since the 19th century or even before, yeah, societies were turned most outwards, trying to control nature, to take advantage of nature. But because of environmental problems, risk, this problem with Japan now, when this, I don't know, problem with the power plants, societies more and more are turning into questioning about values, about economics, about different things. And the key notion in this reflection is this notion of reflexive modernization. Yeah? That the main representatives are Beck from Germany, Anthony Giddens from Scotland, and there are a number of other people. But basically, it's this idea, that's in this last line. Reflexivity is turning the attention, this ability of societies to turn attention into itself. But there are other people, and I have chosen explicitly Margaret Archer because I know that she's British, and you are going to be aware of that. She argues that reflexivity is a feature or a characteristic of actors, that everybody has this ability to reflect or to have what she calls internal conversations. All the time you are having this kind of internal conversation. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to submit this paper, are they going to publish? No, what will happen if they don't accept that? What will happen if I get this job, I don't get this job? What is going to happen if I eat this, if I don't eat this? Are these constant internal conversations. There are more things into this reflection and discussion, but we are not going to go into. Yeah, you can. Well, in the realm of research, once we move into the area of social science research, I think there are some people who distinguish between two types of reflexivity. One, we can call it personal or ontological reflexivity, which is basically how everything we are in a particular moment, the fact of being male, the fact of being foreigner, the fact of being a professor, whatever, influences the act of research, influence our research process. A number of people have already shown that women will have different kind of understanding of same issues. Ethnic minorities will have a different kind of understanding of similar issues. Then other people distinguish, talk about epistemological reflexivity, which is basically refers to our assumptions about knowledge and about reality, and assumptions that are going to share how do we do our research, which topics we choose to inquire, which methodologies we decided to use, what kind of theories we want to use to understand that issue, and that is what they call epistemological reflexivity. But despite the fact that it's important to make this distinction, in my opinion, I think both things are very closely linked together, intrinsically intertwined. It's difficult to separate both things. It's difficult to separate our ontology, what we are, from how we know, from our epistemology. So both things are very close. And in the act of doing research, people have distinguished three different approaches of using reflexivity in social science research. One is this French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu, who called his approach participant objectivation. Participant objectivation. And he understands this, there is a long quote here, you can follow. But basically he is criticizing he's criticizing this tradition in the social sciences of kind of asking oneself when it's doing research. He said that is not enough. If we really want to engage in reflexivity doing research, we have to be able to step back, yeah, and not only monitor ourselves, not only monitor our ontological and epistemological assumptions, but also we have to be able to problematize, to inquire, to question the specific academic, institutional context, cultural context from where we are making sense of something. That means that reflexivity for Bourdieu is basically a critique also of the academia. Yeah? Why we use these theories? What are the political implications behind those theories? No? Why are we working on this particular object or subject? Yeah? Where does this subject come from? What are my strategies, doing this research? Do I really want to understand an issue, or rather is just to advance my academic positioning within an intellectual field? No? Bourdieu is very, very, very critical of this kind of more or less light reflexivity. And he said, reflexivity is not only a way of monitoring ourselves doing research, but also it's a way of criticizing the institutional context. And from this idea, it will be evident the other notions of reflexivity. A second strand of reflexivity in doing social science research is this autobiographical. But I use this term autobiographical just to compress within one word a number of perspectives. The feminist perspective, the interpretive perspective, the hermeneutical perspective, post-colonial, postmodern, post-structural, post-positivism, all. That basically kind of is important to monitor ourselves, ontologically and epistemologically. And then there is this third strand of reflexivity that we can call it dialogical reflexivity, that basically is an attempt to go beyond our internal conversations, and engage ourselves with the internal conversations, with other people. In this case, for instance, we do research with peasant and indigenous communities. So they have their own internal conversation. The agents, the actors, that are different, are culturally embedded. And the idea in this dialogical reflexivity is to try to find ways of bridging these internal conversations that we are having. And some people call that intersubjectivity. So there are these approaches to reflexivity in social science research. Well, let's go into the second part. Let's ask ourselves, why do we write a doctoral thesis or dissertation in the first place? I don't know if this is to push too much, but I would like to listen your views about it. Why are you writing your doctoral thesis?
I was too stupid not. I mean, it's the mediocres who write doctoral theses. The big intelligent people don't need to.
Okay.
Just write whatever, and then people give the professorship. Listen to.
Okay.
So it's the mediocres who do that.
Okay.
Some people believe they have actually something to say, and they want to share it with the others.
Okay. Okay. What else? Why are you engaged in this process?
Money. My own reasons and reasons coming from a professional background that is very weak on its theoretical foundation and wanting to learn a little bit more about why and how I was doing what I was doing before.
Okay, learning. Yeah. Any others? Susan?
I think communicating with another. I actually start to communicate better with myself, to actually understand more about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and come to a different understanding.
Okay. Anybody else?
I know mine was very much to see if I could contribute to the reconstruction of my field of inquiry, which was educational theory. So my motivation, came from that desire to make that kind of contribution.
I ask this question to my doctoral students in many places, and I come up with these three responses that to some extent mirrors different situations, but not of all. I think there are some people who write thesis for pragmatic reasons. It's just maybe like Alon was saying, just let's get a degree and then let's get a job. That is a legitimate reason. Everybody, and we hope also to have a better life after that, after getting a PhD. The second reason that I found is this: to make a contribution. If there is an issue, there is a problem, environmental problems, educational problems, political problems, and one is deeply engaged, committed to make a difference, and wants to contribute to understand things and hopefully to give some hints to address or to solve or to state an alternative to that issue. So we create knowledge and we put it into public discussion in different formats, papers, books, and sometimes it's useful, sometimes no. And I also found that there is another reason, and this is maybe Jack was pointing in that direction too, and some others too. This more intellectual reason, as to learn from the process of doing research, to learn about theories, to learn about the object, and probably to learn also about ourselves, to learn about the world. And so it seems to be that usually people that are engaged in doing research at the doctoral level are doing what they are doing because of different reasons. They are pragmatic, substantive, intellectual. And so in my case, I have also these purposes. I wanted to get a degree, I wanted to contribute with knowledge, but also I was thirsty for learning, very hungry and thirsty. And I wanted to just learn from the experience of doing the dissertation, or the doctoral thesis, or in the US they call it dissertation. So, what I did is, at the same time that I was writing my dissertation, this is the front page of my doctoral dissertation, that deals with issues of irrigation, development issues, but also with views, with technical and socio-technical views about irrigation. It deals with interdisciplinary issues. We're trying to understand how knowledge is constructed at the interface between people coming from engineering, from agriculture, from sociology, from economics, from law. How do they create knowledge? And knowledge that supposedly has to be useful for development. And so that was my dissertation. And it has about 316 pages, double space. But at the same time, because I made the purpose of writing the dissertation, I have this intellectual kind of purpose. At the same time, I wrote what I call a dissertation biography. It's an inside story of how I wrote this doctoral thesis. And so, during this stay here in Bath, I'm organizing my files. And I organized it in 1 to 8 volumes. I organized it in 8 volumes of about 200 pages each. And it's about 1,800 single-space pages. It's a lot. I'm very overwhelmed. And so far, I'm I'm here. I'm organizing little by little. And so, and I also put a name that I'm telling myself that this was written by, not by Fernando Galindo, but rather by Facundo Patefassi, which is kind of, I mean, a name that I invented, that means, this is Latin words.
Pseudonym.
The one who learns doubting or more or less.
Pseudonym.
Yeah, it's my pseudonym, yeah. But I wanted to, before moving, I wanted to call your attention to these two expressions, front stage and backstage. Yeah? Front stage and backstage, like in theater, for instance. In the front stage, what do? You perform before an audience. Yeah? When we are writing a thesis, doctoral thesis, yeah, we also are trying to work something for the front stage. So, and our front stage is the academia, yeah, the discipline, and our committee. You know, we're going to judge the quality of our work. You know? And we have to comply with a number of things, you know, standards, rules, those things. You know? But I was feeling very constrained for that. And I said, hey, this is not me. I'm going to get very alienated if I keep following this. I have to do something. You know? So I moved back and I said, I'm going to write something for me. You know, in the backstage, you can be nude. You know, nobody's going to notice. You know, and you can inquire about a number of things. And that's basically what I did in this so-called dissertation biography, in which I am working at the present. And maybe later I'm going to share a little bit of where I am standing. So, what is a reflective research diary? Probably this reflection that I did back in 1997 very much expresses what a research diary, the meaning of a research diary. It's basically an internal story. It's the inside story, you know, that doesn't always appear in the external narrative. Yeah? And it's very distressing, contradictory, illuminating, and sometimes in a struggle with the external narrative. It's made of a number of things: words, feelings, dreams, biases, you know? Many different things. It is of our ontological totality. You know? And it's, in my view, without inside stories, yeah, our external narratives, yeah, the formal documents that we submit to the academia, yeah, in my view, this is my view, this is my bias, are only boring repetitions of disciplinary power schemes. Yeah? We're just performing what is already there, and we are contributing something. Yeah? And we know these internal stories. Yeah? Our work is lifeless and runs the risk of falling apart. Yeah? But at the same time, trying to bring together, yeah, these front stage and back stage, it could be risky. Yeah? It could be very risky. Yeah? But then I said that that's life, you know. Life is taking risk, you know. That is my kind of poetic summary of what a research diary is. You can see. Okay. Now let's move to the third point. What is a reflective research diary? I want to just point out a few characteristics, but mainly I want you to keep the main ideas. You know, a reflective research diary, in my view, is a personal space and a toolbox to work out a particular knowledge problem, which is in this case a doctoral thesis. You know? And B is also a personal account of the process of how we are becoming researchers, yeah? Or how we are becoming persons, humans. You know? There are these two levels. So let's talk about a little bit about some features of each level. You know? as a personal space and toolbox. You know? I don't know if you have the chance to visit a mechanical shop, for instance. You know, I used to work as in carpentry before. Yeah. Used to build, I don't know, walls, you know, those things. My father is a builder, so I learned that trade. And so, and I realized over time that my father used to kind of, even though he used to buy like tools, for instance, yeah, sometimes there were particular tools that were not fitting, you know, the task at hand. And so what he used to do is to kind of shape his own tools. And when we are in graduate school, when we are doing a doctoral program, we take methodology classes, we take theory classes, and different classes in different substantive topics, you know. And we know, and we gather knowledge, but also we gather tools, you know, approaches, those things. And so, but there is a challenge, I think we have the point, once we are engaged in writing our own work, I think there is the challenge of contextualizing those tools. And so, a reflective research diary could be that personal space where we can begin to shape our own tools, as my father used to do. You know? Have tools, standard tools, but then he used to accommodate to his own purposes. And in the process, used to build sometimes his own tools. So in this case, I also, in this dissertation biography, I began to build my own tools in order to respond to the specific challenge of my own research. So, as a diary could be a toolbox to work out our changing, writing, and editing strategies. Also to work out the links between our work and the literature and audiences. And maybe I'm going to just click here and give you a better sense of that. Okay. There is a drop. I'm going to skip that, I think. Then a diary is also a place where we kind of try to solve our own methodological puzzles, conceptual puzzles, yeah, how to deal with data. Then it's also a place where we can take account of the changing process, of the changing conceptions of our research object, yeah? And how also we are constructing arguments. Yeah? Then it could be also a place where we can deal with the logistic aspects, you know, organization, time, resources, planning, those, well, many different things that go into writing a doctoral thesis. Yeah? I'm going to give examples later on about this. In sum, a research diary is an account of the process of how we began to construct this very complex object that we call doctoral thesis. Yeah? It's not simple because it's made of a number of things. There are a number of things in this object. You know? And one of the purpose of this presentation is to make you realize again, because probably you realize it already, that it's very complex. It's made of many, many layers. Yeah? Okay, let's move to the other dimension. At the same time, as reflected diary is an account of our own process of becoming researchers. Yeah? An account of our academic negotiations with our committee, with the academia, with the department, turning points in our learning process, yeah? an index of our structural learning. I'm going to go very soon into that. Yeah? It's also a space where we sort ethical dilemmas. Yeah? It's let me just illustrate some of these points. In my own experience, I have realized that in this process of becoming researchers, there are very interesting turning points. Okay? And I wanted to share one turning point that I think maybe is going to connect with your own experience. There was, when we take classes, for instance, or seminars, we are used to a certain kind of discourse that deal mostly with ideas. And one day it was in 1999, it was November 14th, it was Sunday, I was getting ready myself for a seminar, like a seminar like this, where it's supposed to be discuss issues of culture. Okay? And I'm interested in issues of cultures, and so I was getting over my notes, saying, I want to participate, to contribute in the discussions. But then at some point, I began to ask myself why I was doing that. Why I was taking the time to go over my notes. Yeah? Why? And I said, there is something here that seems not to be right. I said, it seems to be that I was taking time to go over my notes, to dress myself to perform those ideas that I got it from one article, from another article, from one class, from another class. And I was dressing myself, just gathering just to go then to the seminar and say, just present other ideas, just perform ideas. And I said, this is not, something's wrong, And so I said, maybe I should not go to the seminar. And for me, making that decision of not going to that seminar to perform ideas was a very interesting point in my own process of becoming a researcher. Because after that point, I was basically a performer. Just perform ideas of different theories, of different authors, But I was not putting myself, I wasn't putting my own ideas, my own reflections. So I decided not to go to the seminar and say, okay, I'm going to put an end to this stage in my training, and now I'm going to begin working in my own ideas, even if I am talking about the same issues, but I want to give my own insights. So this was a very interesting turning point in my process. And just let me give you another example that probably is going to come up. I have found interacting with a number of friends and colleagues that there is a very difficult, it's very difficult to get away from the literature, for instance. There are some colleagues that, usually the ones that are beginning to do their research, that they spend their time reading and reading years. They spend years reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. Even though despite the fact that they already have very interesting data, they are kind of afraid of engaging with that. And rather they're kind of swimming in safe waters, saying, oh, okay, here is the knowledge is organized. Just dealing with it. And then it's difficult to deal with the messy things, with data that's unorganized, It's big. And so every time that I told these colleagues to, hey, stop doing that, move to your data, they say, okay, I'm going to do it. Okay, you just touch a little bit and then go back to the literature. And this is something very common, I guess. Not in all cases, but something that happens very often. And it's part of breaking with those habits. I think also a research diary can be an index, or I call it an index, a space where our structural learning could express itself. Structural learning is a notion coined by Jean Piaget, and it basically refers to that learning that occurs without us being conscious. That knowledge that our bodies, to some extent, for instance, in my case, I come from another culture, and this is my first time in England, but there are things that I'm learning, unconsciously. There's many things learning unconsciously, And so I have the hint that keeping a research diary, could be a place where we can get some hints of that structural learning. Things that are there. That sometimes we can think that they are not related with our research work, but it's that. But in the end, it could be related. Okay. Then, diary could be also a place where we can try to deal with personal dilemmas. In this case, me as a foreign student studying in the US, I had this dilemma. Staying in the US or leaving? Leaving or stay? That is, a few days ago, a student from chemistry from Africa visited me, and he came with this dilemma. He said, "Hey, Fernando, I don't know what to do. I'm almost done with my thesis, but then at the same time, I don't want to go back to Egypt because you hear about the political turmoil there and da. I would like to stay here in the UK, make some experience." And it seems to be that those who come from overseas, we confront, we face this dilemma. And everyone has to kind of sort it out by himself or herself. But keeping a diary also could be a way, space where you can start reflecting about that and say what are the options, what are the possibilities. And here basically I'm kind of voicing, my own dilemma. That was ongoing, ongoing. Actually I didn't resolve it, and it's something that we have to live with. Okay, now I would like to move to just to share a few tips about keeping a research diary, reflecting. First, there is not one model. You have to find your own model. Many of you, for instance, have these phones, with a lot of capabilities now. The Blackberries. That could be one space where you can start keeping your notes. But try to find your own model. And second, I think it's important to realize, at least to think, to ask ourselves, how do ideas occur to us? How do ideas came to our minds? And I would like to share the view of German sociologist Max Weber. And why I bring this to the discussion. When we're writing a doctoral thesis, we are engaged in a very active and very fruitful moments in our lives. We are trying to build something, to create something out of nothing. We go and look for things, different materials, resources, and we try to create something. And it's a very, very intense moment. And every time we are with ideas, insights, And sometimes we just kind of let them let these ideas go away. And I wanted to share this quote from Max Weber, who said, "How do ideas came to us?" And he said it's very paradoxical. Ideas don't come to us, sometimes, many times, when we're desperately looking for them, Please, please, I want to know what's the argument of my research, or what's going to be my analytical framework, or how I'm going to kind of incorporate data. And he says that ideas came when we are pleasantly smoking a cigar, or when we are walking. He said this, I love this part, when he said, like, when he described Isering. Or when we are walking on a slowly ascendant path. Coming here to the university, I was thinking about that, Okay, let's see what idea is going to occur to me, or I'm walking on that. But the basic thrust of this quote is that ideas, come to us whenever they please. And we have to be attentive to that. And not only attentive, we have to nurture them also. It's just have a place to nurture them. Okay? Even though it's a wild idea, just be democratic. Just include yourself. Just open your shelter and say, "Hey, idea, come here and just live with us. Let's see how we can build a community of ideas there." Just be welcome. Okay. Also, I wanted to point out to you this idea that comes from an American sociologist, Laurel Richardson, who has a very interesting article in this handbook of qualitative research that is called "Writing, a Method of Inquiry." And I think this is very important to remember when we are working our doctoral thesis. Sometimes people want to have everything clear before writing something, a very clear outline. He wants to have a clear direction of where he or she wants to go. But these people, like Laurel Richardson, is arguing the opposite. They're saying, writing is a method of inquiry. It's a method of discovery. It's a method of finding things. It's a method of realizing what you are thinking. What are the layers of what you are thinking? It's a way of discovering. And from my own experience, I can say that sometimes I just sit down and let my hands just type. And then I realized what I was thinking or what I was feeling, But oftentimes I will say, people are trying to have clear the idea first in their minds and then just go to the paper. And this is just, I don't know, a way of jumping this fear of the blank page. Then I already referred to this as I said, writing a dissertation is a very intense and creative moment in our lives, and ideas are constantly coming, outpouring. And it's important, I think, to be welcome. And I would like to just call your attention to this part. Sometimes we have this presumption or this assumption that an idea is not relevant for our research. I say, no, that's secondary. But I realize that that feeling or that is based on this presumption that we know where we are going. That's it. This is not important because we assume that we know where we are going. Yeah. But it seems to be that doing research is not a straightforward business. It's just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it will be advisable, helpful, I guess, to keep track, to welcome those random thoughts that are going in our minds. Constantly just make space and write it down. And probably in the future it's going to be, oh, this is what I needed. And so it's easier to go find that friend and just copy and paste, and then just elaborate. And this, I wanted to share a little bit about this. A friend of mine sent me a month ago, probably 2 months ago, a call for papers for a conference in the US. And the topic was interesting, it was development, culture, and commodification, those things. I've been working these things. I'm working actually issues of development and culture right now in Bolivia. So, I think maybe I have something for this. So I went to my diary, just find, done. And in a matter of 7 to 10 minutes, I already have my abstract. Something that I thought before, maybe 2 years ago. It was, suddenly it was relevant to go to a conference. And then they send me an email and say, hey man, come, we are going to pay you this and this. And I have to give them the answer. So, but it was very interesting, it was very satisfying. Say, at the end, it's helpful. Because instead of investing hours and hours thinking about the abstract, and trying to make it relevant, just copy, paste, just edit a little bit, send it, that's it. It's kind of maybe some image. Okay. Then another thing I wanted to share with you is I used to call it before what I call it my mini-me. It was basically like a small, even smaller than this. Everywhere, because I was so focused in what I was doing, I was so enthusiastic about my research. If I go to a bar, if I go to a theater, if I travel, all the time I was thinking about that. Every time I had an idea, I just write it down. Yeah? Even in the bathroom. Sorry for the example, but it's just. And that was very helpful because at the end of the day, I used to jot down, to write down very few notes on my mini-me, and then at the end of the day, I used to go to my journal and kind of develop the idea, develop the idea, not keep going. And also, when working in specific parts of the thesis, a chapter or a section, sometimes new ideas will emerge. And instead of just letting them die, open another file and just write about it. It was a very interactive process also. Because also from the writing of the thesis, new ideas will come, so welcome. Okay. So, what are the benefits of reflexivity, or more specifically, what are the benefits of keeping a diary, a research diary? And I want to just start with this quote, and this actually happened to me when I was washing dishes. It's not that academic, to wash dishes, but I think that. And it occurred to me this idea of the meaning of writing this diary, and it seems to be that for me it was a preparation time when I can toss around some ideas and then let them mature. And in this sense, it fulfilled the function of filling those gaps, those time gaps, when I have this feeling that I wasn't doing anything in my work, in my research. But on the backstage, the process was very intense, a lot of ideas in the backstage. But in the front stage, I was very disappointed, saying, okay, there is nothing. I haven't written a section or a chapter. It's already 2 months since I came back from Bolivia and I don't have a chapter, so what's going on? But in the backstage, it was very intense. And so that's, I think, one benefit. It helps you to keep alive your research, despite the fact that formally you don't have something to turn still, But in the backstage, you are elaborating, writing. Then, another benefit, I think, in my own case of reflexivity is that it helped me to learn a few things about the craft of writing. And in this particular case, just to improve my English writing skills, perhaps. I am a foreign student. English is not my first language, but since I kept this diary in English, for me it was like doing exercises every day. Just writing. I wasn't so much concerned about how well it was written. My purpose was to elaborate the ideas, And in this process I realized that there is a difference between writing for others, and in this case the others could be the academia, our colleagues. And if we dig a little bit behind that, why we write for others, we could have this kind of negative assessment that sometimes Bourdieu gives. Says that sometimes we publish, we write, not because we really want to contribute something, but really because we want to position ourselves within the intellectual community. And but that is one vision, that will be contested. Then I also realized that there is in writing, there is another type of writing, which is writing for oneself, writing for ourselves. And that this has, I think, deeper implications for what we are, not only as academics, but also as persons. Because we are really trying to, not only to create a product, but also we are trying to build ourselves, not only as academics, but also as persons. And so for me, over time, writing a research diary became a method of work. Today, I cannot conceive working without reflecting at the same time. Every day when I began my work, I open my reflexive file, just refresh a little bit, and then open the file in which I am working, and go back and forth, It's a method of work. But at the same time, for me, it's a method of living. There, I try to sort out my own dilemmas about, as an academic, what do I want to do, where do I want to go, and also how I'm relating with colleagues, with my own family. So that's, in my case, the benefit of having done this. And also, writing a diary, I gained the right to say I. And this is, it seems not that important, but in my case it was very important because I came from a culture and society where community is very strong. And to say I is, it's like stepping out of that cultural boundaries. We use I, but I also realize that there are different I's that live in us, and I think kind of this connects with some of what Jack has been working. And in my case, I realized that there was 3 I's. One I was the enrolled I, the enrolled I that accepts what the literature says, what accepts what the others say because based on their authority. Then the other I was the attributive I, saying, okay, now I am a PhD candidate, so I have the right to say this, and my voice counts, And then there was another I, the reflexive I. And in the diary there is a very interesting dance between these 3 different I's, kind of moving, dialoguing. Then I also realized, and I think this is important to stress, I also realized that ideas come in bundles. Come in bundles. Because that's the way how we think. We don't think in a very we don't think analytically. We think synthetically. When we are trying to state an argument, then when we are trying to present an argument, we present the idea in an analytical way, saying logical. But often we are thinking in a very synthetic way, in a very holistic way. But when we are writing a thesis, we are kind of pushed to write analytically, just to put an idea, to develop the idea, to support with empirical evidence the idea. And that's in the front stage. But in the back stage, we can give ourselves the freedom, to think in many different directions, and be able to capture this particular nature of ideas, that they come in bundles. Because they like, because they like to stay together too. Ideas like to stay together in one. And in the front stage, I couldn't realize this, but in the back stage, I realized that there is this complexity of ideas. Then I think another benefit is, and I would like to stress this, I think a key challenge is not to write the whole thesis or dissertation, but rather the small pieces that make it. And those are the sections and are the chapters. I want to give an example. This was after I finished with writing the first chapter of my doctoral thesis. It's called a contextual chapter. It talks about the context. And this is a reflection about what I learned from writing that. And I identified 4 different stages that I went in writing that chapter. But it was this particular chapter, the contextual one, because every chapter will demand a different logic. And so there are the 4 stages. The first one, just lie down. Sorry, okay, there is an error here. Lie down our ideas and feelings. Without worrying too much about the coherence. Just your ideas. Just your ideas. In the second, organize and reorganize your ideas. But after you have already something written. But if you don't do that, what happens is you are constantly revising yourself. Because in your mind, you are trying to sound or to write as already is published in a journal. From the beginning, you just have this feeling of, writing like if you were just this is going to be the published version. You know? And we don't realize that that text, the text that we write, have a social life also. That we go through a process of, one version, another version. I don't know. People say that they go 20 versions. And we listen that out. This is crazy. And so the first stage, just put down our ideas, what we are thinking, even if they are biased, because it's a draft. What, as some writers call, is the shitty, sorry for the expression, the shitty first draft. It's for ourselves. And then in the second, we can start organizing and reorganizing, but having the ideas already written in the text. It's easy. It's easy to organize, to move one thing to another place if it's already in paper. But if you are trying to edit, at the same time that you are trying to write, you never are going to be able to actually come out with a sentence, or with a section, or with a chapter. Then, in the third stage, writing this kind of chapter, I try to fit my ideas, put into dialogue my own ideas and argument with the empirical information coming from the primary data and also with the literature. And that process can be very painful, difficult to negotiate, because sometimes we kind of more inclined to incorporate the literature, the data, and so little by little, the chapter is mostly about what the literature says, and not about what we want to say. Then in the fourth stage, writing this chapter, I came to grasp, I put some balance between my own voice, my own ideas, my own arguments, and the extremes, the other voices, the strange voices that come from the literature and the data. But that was the experience writing one type of chapter. Every chapter will pose its own challenges. Oops. Okay, then to continue, what are the benefits of reflexivity? I also learned a number of things about the craft of doing research. For instance, this tension between being a researcher and a thinker. And this is a very big issue. It seems not, but I have the feeling that more and more in the late 20th century and the beginning of this century, research is becoming part of the market. We are kind of driven toward that. And so, even though we have these two features of being researchers and being thinkers also, seems to be that we're becoming unidimensional, as Herbert Marcuse said in his famous books back in the 60s. Seems to be that academia is becoming unidimensional, just writing things that people want to hear. And so we are not spending more time in trying to understand things in a different way. So. And I would like to call your attention to what I learned from Bertrand Russell, a British philosopher. He says that more and more, that was back in the 50s, he said that people are very worried about to think, say, and feel what was close to be thought, said, or felt, rather than having better thoughts, say more penetrating things, or have feelings beyond what is in fashion. Seems to be because of this academic capitalism in which we are now living, we are rushing ourselves to just put in our paper there, yeah? Without losing, yeah, this sense that we have a moral obligation of trying to say something meaningful, you know? And we are losing that. That is, for me, that's a concern. But it's difficult to balance that because we have to survive also. For many of us, the academia is the way where we make our living. So, but at least to realize, to think about this, it would be kind of first step to put some balance. And so, what is this distinction between the researcher and the thinker? It's made by a number of different people. I am drawing the ideas of Heidegger. Martin Heidegger makes this distinction between the researcher and the thinker. The Frankfurt School has also made this distinction in their own way, and they distinguish between instrumental rationality and substantive rationality. But the thinker is basically somebody who's, you know, who's not stretched or who's thinking in different directions, one way, beyond disciplinary boundaries, etc. You know? And going back again to the back and front stage, you know, in the front stage when we're writing papers and writing a thesis, you know, to some extent we have to perform our hat of researchers. You know? But that doesn't mean that we have to constrain the another hat, you know, to think, you know, to reflect. Then I'm going to skip some things. I realized also that there are different research styles, what I call the Apollinian and the Dionysian. The Apollinian, Apollo was in Greek mythology is the god of perfection, yeah? And the Dionysius is the god of drunkenness, of the good life. And we often try to work our research in the Apollonian model, you know, just to have a clear idea where do I want to go, and I'm not going to miss this. We have that idea, that myth. You know? But if we are really trying to do research, try to discover new things, you know, I think we need to live between these two poles, you know. Be also realize also that research has also this Dionysian character, you know. It's like a drunk person who doesn't know where he goes out of the bar saying, okay, where do I live? I have to go this way, to the right. You know? On the way to his house, he found another bar on the left. He said, oh, okay, please give me one more. You know? He goes out, he said, where I was going? To the right, okay. He's coming back again. You know? Research is like that. You know? It's not straightforward. It's a process of losing oneself, a process of finding and losing oneself. Okay. Another thing I wanted to share is the importance of stepping back. And many times we think that research is always going forward. Forward, yeah? Like an endless process, going forward. But sometimes we need kind of step back and ask ourselves, is this enough for for my doctoral research, for my doctoral thesis? And sometimes the argument of our work will become evident in the more unlikely places. You know? And if we really trust and say, okay, I'm going to move up to here. So instead of trying to dig more and more, I would say that it would be useful to just turn back, and now my challenge is going to be, yeah, to understand how I come to think this argument. Yeah? In my case, it was this. My argument is this tension between a technical and a socio-technical view of education. That's the main argument that frames my research. And so, rather than trying to look for more things, what I did is I stood and I turned back and I said, now my whole challenge for this research is going to be to realize, to become aware, how do I come to think in these terms? It was the opposite. And it helped, because otherwise I could be looking forward. And finally, I want to share about the importance of the first chapter. And there is this French philosopher and epistemologist called Gaston Bachelard. He was Bourdieu's professor, Pierre Bourdieu's professor, and Bourdieu draws a lot on him. And he has this book that was translated in English, I think, very late, in the 80s or 90s. It's called The Formation of the Scientific Mind. The Formation of the Scientific Mind. And in there, what he describes is that different epistemological obstacles that impede that research going forward. And in the first chapter, he describes what he calls the epistemological obstacle of the first, I will call it the first love. The first thing that we have think, or that we found. Is and it's like and this obstacle works in this way. When we are young, for instance, when we fall in love, our first love, the next time that we are looking for somebody, we seems to be that we are looking for somebody that has certain features of our first love. And that's for Bachelard, this is an obstacle. So we need to overcome that. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to discover new things. In my case, I didn't overcome that. I lived in that obstacle. And the first chapter that I wrote, I call it the substantive chapter, which is different from the contextual chapter. And the first substantive chapter, which is basically the chapter in which I was trying to make sense of data, primary data, helped me to find my way to write the whole research. It was because I found a model. I found a model of how to work out, how to dialogue with data, how to dialogue with the literature, and how to put my own ideas and voice into writing a chapter. So the first chapter, in my case, defined the path that I follow. And in fact, that chapter became the whole thesis. Before, I was thinking only in making that chapter just one chapter. But once I realized, I engaged myself with the data, I realized that there was too much complexity in there. And so what it's supposed initially to be just one chapter, it became the whole thesis, because I have enough data to make it done. And the lesson of this is, and everybody who went to the process is probably going to say the same, is that when we gather, at least in the qualitative tradition, when we gather primary data, we end up collecting too much data, for I don't know, for how many theses, but for many. Okay. I will stop, I think, there because and that's just a couple of minutes to say what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to, I call it my project, entitled Anamnesis of Becoming a Researcher. And anamnesis basically is a Greek word that means recollection of the process of, it means recollection, remembering. Yeah? And what I'm trying to do is take in my own case, this reflexive diary that I have, these 8 volumes. I want to write something. I want to write a methodological book, but it's going to be rather unconventional, because it's based on this experience. And my approach, my initial approach is I am kind of drawing in these psychological theories of the dialogical self. The basic assumption is that we, as a person, the I is one, but are also multiple. This one I, but we are also multiple. And so based on this assumption, what I'm going to do, basically what I'm doing is dialoguing, is establishing a dialogue between an older I, in this case me, with my younger I, the one who wrote this journal. No? And the initial finding is, my initial finding is that it seems to be that the reason why I did this, among other reasons, is based on this Prometheus complex. And the Prometheus complex basically points out to this drive that every human being has, of trying to learn more than our parents, more than our teachers, more than our colleagues. It seems to be that what has driven me to write this massive research biography was this complex. But with one addition. I wanted to overcome not only my parents, my professors, my colleagues, but also myself. That's what I'm finding in the data. So I hope to sometime in the future have this book. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm conscious that I have to shoot off now, and I also have to take the tea and coffee.